Will Russia protect Burkina Faso if it is facing a threat from the West? Recent events have shaken the geopolitical landscape of West Africa as Russia deploys a massive number of troops to Burkina Faso in response to a failed assassination attempt on President Ibrahim Traoré. It is clear that Russia will stand with Burkina Faso no matter what. But why once again an assassination attempt? And why is Russia willing to protect? Let's find out. We all know what external factors are behind it. And not just us, but everyone is saying it. So, what drove the West, or its allies, to attempt the assassination of Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré?
Audacity to tell us that we are poor countries. They are taking trillions out of Africa every year. And what is the African doing? Like an obedient, programmed black man, we just give in. And then one might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brother and sister, they have tried. Documented to this day, 22 coups where leaders were assassinated. The first 7, when they decided they were pulling out of the CFA and that they're going to print their own money, they were assassinated. Every time an African leader has tried to do what's best for their country, they were assassinated.
Let's cut through the noise and get straight to the point. The West, or its allies, had every incentive to attempt the assassination of Ibrahim Traoré, and it's no mystery why. Since coming to power in 2022 through a popular uprising, Traoré has become a symbol of defiance, a thorn lodged firmly in the side of Western powers that have long treated Africa as their resource pit and geopolitical chessboard. This is about much more than just one leader. This is about the West's desperate attempt to cling to its crumbling grip on a region that is rejecting it outright. When Traoré emerged as the face of Burkina Faso's new leadership, it wasn't just another regime change. For the West, it was the start of a nightmare. There was a young, dynamic African leader, unapologetically anti-West, who wasted no time in kicking out French troops, shutting down Western influence, and severing ties with France, Burkina Faso's former colonial ruler. That alone was enough to set off alarms in Paris, Washington, and London. The French, once confident in their neo-colonial arrangements, saw their influence in West Africa being torn apart. And behind closed doors, you can be sure that the discussions were not about diplomatic solutions. They were about how to get rid of this problem, permanently. And this wasn't just talk. Traoré didn't pull punches. He actively worked to undo the very structures of Western economic control in Africa. The West has spent decades entrenching itself in Africa through financial institutions, military bases, and so-called aid, all designed to maintain a quiet but firm control over the continent. Traoré saw right through this facade and made it clear that Burkina Faso would not be a pawn in this game anymore. His rhetoric wasn't just words. It was followed by real action. Partnering with Russia, negotiating military deals, and forming economic alliances that directly undermined the West's monopoly in the region. This is where the West's panic button got pressed. Here's the critical piece that should make everyone sit up and take notice: Traoré's growing alignment with Russia. If the West feared anything more than an African leader rejecting their influence, it was an African leader turning to Russia for support. Why? Because Russia represents a strategic counterweight to Western dominance, and an alliance between Burkina Faso and Moscow threatens to unravel the West's long-standing control over not just Burkina Faso, but potentially the entire region. The assassination attempt on Traoré came suspiciously close to the signing of key cooperation agreements between Burkina Faso and Russia. These agreements were not just symbolic. They involved military aid, Russian troops and resources coming to assist Burkina Faso in its fight against jihadists, a role that French forces have failed to fulfill. It's no coincidence that this assassination attempt happened after Traoré sealed these deals. The West couldn't afford to let Russia deepen its foothold in Africa through leaders like Traoré, who openly challenged the West's economic and military dominance. Western media and political leaders may frame this as an internal issue within Burkina Faso or as part of the chaotic instability that plagues the Sahel region. But don't be fooled. The real issue at play here is the threat Traoré's survival poses to Western interests. The assassination was a strategic move, an attempt to reassert control over a region that is rapidly slipping away from Western hands. Ask yourself, why now? Why did this assassination attempt take place after Traoré strengthened ties with Russia? The West's hand was forced. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Traoré was consolidating power, rallying more African nations behind him, and becoming a symbol of anti-Western resistance. The growing popularity of leaders like Traoré is part of a broader shift across Africa, a continent that is starting to wake up to the fact that Western aid is a scam designed to maintain dependence. Leaders like Traoré see this and act on it, and that is precisely why he became a target. Apart from this, watch as Western commentators try to distort Traoré's motivations, painting him as an extremist or a destabilizing force. They'll say he's leading Burkina Faso into chaos by rejecting French support, but the reality is the exact opposite. Traoré's leadership is stabilizing the country by replacing French ineffectiveness with tangible Russian military assistance. The West needs this straw man to deflect from the fact that their influence is waning. They need to create a narrative that portrays Traoré as reckless, because the truth, that he's making strides toward genuine independence, would expose their failures. The assassination attempt was meant to be a quick surgical strike, a way to eliminate the problem before it grew into something larger. But the West underestimated something crucial: the resilience of Burkina Faso and the extent of Russian involvement. The moment the attempt on Traoré's life failed, it set off a chain reaction that the West wasn't prepared for. Not only did the plot fail, but it also galvanized Russian support. Russian officials wasted no time in making it clear that any further Western interference in Burkina Faso would be met with consequences. Russian troops were immediately deployed to reinforce security around Traoré, sending a direct message: Moscow will not stand by as the West continues to meddle in African politics. This isn't just about one assassination plot gone wrong. This is about the West's dwindling ability to manipulate African nations through fear and violence. Every failed attempt to undermine leaders like Traoré only strengthens the resolve of countries like Burkina Faso to push harder for independence. And every Russian troop on the ground in West Africa is a stark reminder to the West that its days of unchecked power are coming to an end. The West is now left in a precarious position. Traoré survived, and his survival is a testament to the changing power dynamics in Africa. The more the West attempts to control the situation through brute force, whether by assassination, plots, or economic sanctions, the more they push African nations like Burkina Faso into the arms of alternative powers like Russia and China. The failed attempt on Traoré's life is emblematic of the West's broader failure to adapt to a world where its influence is no longer guaranteed. Maybe it's time to admit that they no longer have the moral or political authority to dictate what happens in Africa. The era of Western supremacy is fading, and the assassination attempt on Traoré is just another desperate gasp from a power structure that knows its time is running out. The West can continue with its covert operations, its economic strong-arming, and its underhanded tactics, but the writing is on the wall. Africa is changing, and leaders like Traoré are at the forefront of that change. What the West should be asking themselves is this: how long can they keep up the facade of control before the entire continent rejects them outright? Make no mistake, the assassination attempt on Traoré was a last-ditch effort to silence a movement that is growing far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Traoré's survival, against all odds, is not just a victory for him, it's a victory for Africa. And it's a warning to the West: your days of unchecked dominance are numbered. But now an important question is, why is Russia sending troops to Burkina Faso? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Russia's deployment of troops to Burkina Faso is more than just a strategic calculation. It's a natural alignment of two nations seeking independence from the suffocating grip of Western control. Let's make this clear. Burkina Faso, under the bold leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, has chosen a path that defies centuries of exploitation, colonialism, and manipulation by Western powers. And Russia? Russia is not swooping in as a savior, but as an ally, ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with a nation that is fighting for its right to self-determination. Together, they're rewriting the script of African sovereignty. The West would love to frame this cooperation as some kind of meddling by Russia, but that's just another tired excuse to disguise its fear. The truth is that Burkina Faso is rising, and it's making its own choices. Traoré has demonstrated something that terrifies Western powers: a young African leader who is unafraid to sever ties with his colonial past and forge new relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests. And when Burkina Faso looked to the horizon for partners who truly respect African sovereignty, it didn't have to search long. Russia stepped up, not to dominate, but to collaborate. Russia's interests in Burkina Faso go beyond mere opportunism. Let's dispel that Western narrative immediately. This isn't about exploiting African resources in the same way that France and the US have done for decades. Russia's involvement is about partnership, one that allows Burkina Faso to leverage its natural wealth without strings attached. Gold, uranium, and rare earth minerals are not just riches to be extracted and shipped off to fuel Western economies anymore. Under Traoré's leadership, with Russia's cooperation, Burkina Faso is beginning to manage these resources on its terms. The West had its chance, and all it brought was debt, dependency, and misery. Now, a new chapter begins. Russia's military assistance is essential, but let's not fall into the Western trap of viewing this as mere boots on the ground. This partnership goes far deeper. Russia is empowering Burkina Faso with advanced military training, tactical support, and security infrastructure that is tailored to the unique challenges the country faces. Compare that with the French military presence, which for years did little but prop up a failing regime and protect foreign interests. Traoré, in his wisdom, saw through that farce. And so did Russia. This is about giving Burkina Faso the tools to defend itself, secure its borders, and maintain its independence without having to rely on the so-called peacekeepers, who have been anything but. Russia is not here to take from Burkina Faso, it's here to give. Yes, Russia stands to gain from this partnership, but not in the exploitative sense that we've come to associate with Western interventions. For Russia, Burkina Faso represents an opportunity to strengthen its alliances with nations that are tired of being dictated to by the West. And for Burkina Faso, Russia is a partner that offers real security assistance and economic cooperation without the neo-colonial baggage. This is a mutually beneficial relationship, built on respect and shared goals, and that's what truly terrifies the West. Now, the West will throw around the word stability as if they have a monopoly on it. The West argues that Burkina Faso's turn to Russia destabilizes the region. Really? Let's be honest. Who created the instability in the first place? For decades, the West, particularly France, has meddled in West African affairs, leaving behind a legacy of coups, weak governments, and endless cycles of violence. Traoré, with Russia's support, is breaking that cycle. Stability doesn't come from being a pawn in someone else's game. It comes from having the power to defend your sovereignty, and that's exactly what Burkina Faso is building now, with Russia's help. Russia's strategic interest in Burkina Faso is also about leading a broader movement for a multipolar world. The days of a single global power calling the shots are over, and Burkina Faso is at the heart of this transformation. The West can no longer assume that Africa will fall in line with its outdated, imperialistic vision. Burkina Faso is proving that African nations have choices that don't involve bending the knee to the IMF, World Bank, or any other Western financial institutions designed to trap countries in endless cycles of debt. Russia's role here is to support Burkina Faso in its quest for true sovereignty, free from the yoke of Western interference. Just look at what Russia has done in other African nations like Mali and the Central African Republic. These countries, much like Burkina Faso, have suffered under the weight of Western manipulation. But, with Russian support, they have started to reclaim their agency on the global stage. Burkina Faso sees this, and it's no coincidence that it's following a similar path. Russia isn't dictating terms, it's providing the tools for self-reliance. The West hates this because it exposes their failures and their inability to truly help African nations stand on their own feet. Russia's involvement in Burkina Faso also sends a message to the rest of Africa. It tells the continent's leaders, you have options. Moscow is offering something that the West never has: genuine support for African sovereignty. And make no mistake, Burkina Faso is embracing this opportunity with both hands. Traore knows that the old ways of dependence on Western powers lead nowhere but stagnation and exploitation. With Russia, Burkina Faso is positioning itself as a leader in a new African order, one where nations are free to chart their destinies without Western oversight. So, when we ask why Russia is invested in Burkina Faso, the answer is simple: because Burkina Faso, under Traore's leadership, is the future of Africa. A future where African nations stand tall, reject Western exploitation, and build partnerships on their terms. And Russia, in supporting this vision, stands to gain not only an ally, but a key role in the transformation of a continent that is finally breaking free. So, yes, we know that the West is scared of Russia and Africa's ties. But what are the deep reasons no one talks about? The West's frantic response to Russia's growing influence in Burkina Faso and across Africa reveals a fear that goes beyond simple geopolitical maneuvering. It's a realization that their long-standing control over the continent is unraveling faster than they ever expected. For decades, Western powers like France and the United States treated Africa as their private hunting ground, exerting dominance through military bases, economic policies, and political strings pulled from behind closed doors. But now, with Russia stepping in and offering a different kind of partnership, the West's house of cards is falling apart. France especially is reeling from the seismic shifts in its former colonies. Let's face it, France's so-called peacekeeping missions in places like Burkina Faso and Mali were nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to maintain control over African resources and strategic military outposts. For years, these countries were fed up with the illusion of security that French troops provided. In reality, France's presence only deepened instability and allowed the continued exploitation of Africa's wealth for European benefit. The recent wave of expulsions of French troops from West Africa, spearheaded by leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, isn't just a policy change. It's an indictment of decades of French hypocrisy. Russia's arrival merely exposed what was already a festering wound. African nations are done with lies and manipulation, and they're choosing new allies that respect their sovereignty. But it's not just France feeling the pressure. The United States is equally rattled by Russia's increasing role in the region. Washington has long relied on Africa's weak and dependent governments to secure its interests, whether that meant controlling trade routes, accessing strategic resources, or using African soil as a base for military operations disguised as counterinsurgency. For the U.S., Africa was never about partnership. It was about maintaining a global empire where African nations remained subordinate players. Now, with Russia offering genuine military and economic support, African nations are turning away from Washington's aid packages that come with strings attached and are instead embracing partnerships that allow them to stand on their own feet. What terrifies the West is that Russia is playing by a different set of rules that the West can't easily manipulate. While the West cloaks its interference in the language of development and democracy, Russia is offering straightforward, no-nonsense deals, security assistance, resource partnerships, and military cooperation, all without the usual Western conditionalities. And this is precisely why African nations like Burkina Faso are aligning with Moscow. Russia is treating African nations as equals, while the West continues to view them as tools in their global chess game. The West's loss of influence isn't just about military bases or resource contracts. It's about losing the narrative. For the first time in a long time, African nations have a choice, and they're choosing partners that respect their autonomy. From coups to economic sanctions, Western powers have done everything possible to ensure that Africa remains divided, weak, and dependent. But Russia is offering an alternative that frightens the West precisely because it threatens this long-standing system of control. By providing military and economic aid without the web of exploitation that the West has spun for decades, Russia is showing African nations that there's another way, a way that doesn't involve perpetual subjugation to foreign interests. Let's not forget who the real meddler is here. The West, for centuries, has drawn Africa's borders, orchestrated its coups, and siphoned off its wealth, all while pretending to be a benevolent force. Russia's engagement in Burkina Faso and across Africa highlights the hypocrisy of this narrative. When African nations choose their allies freely, without coercion or financial shackles, the West panics. Why? Because it exposes the fact that the so-called stability they've brought to the continent was never real. It was a smokescreen for control. The West has never cared about Africa's true independence, only about its ability to extract resources and maintain geopolitical dominance. France's panic and the US's alarm. It's all rooted in the realization that their days of dictating terms to Africa are coming to an end. Russia's growing presence is accelerating that process, and the West simply can't stand it. Western media has been quick to demonize Russia, portraying Moscow as an aggressor in Africa. But let's be real. The only aggression here is the West's reaction to losing control. Russia's partnerships with African nations, including Burkina Faso, are built on mutual benefit, not exploitation. These nations are no longer interested in being told how to run their economies, their militaries, or their futures. They're looking to Russia for security, economic cooperation, and most importantly, respect. And that's what the West cannot give, because to give respect means to relinquish control, something the West has never been willing to do. The West uses a laughable point. They claim Russia is there to destabilize Africa and push the region into chaos. But let's look at the facts. The West, particularly France and the US, have done nothing but foster instability in Africa. Their so-called aid programs have crippled economies with debt. Their military interventions have entrenched violence, and their political manipulation has left nations divided and weak. Russia's presence in Burkina Faso is offering a way out of that instability. A chance for real sovereignty and self-reliance, something the West has always denied the continent. Could Russia's involvement in Burkina Faso signify a new era of African independence and self-determination? For far too long, Africa's quest for true sovereignty has been overshadowed by foreign domination, disguised under different names: colonialism, globalization, development aid, and structural adjustment programs. These were all just different leashes used to keep African nations bound to the interests of Western powers. But now, with Russia's involvement in Burkina Faso, we are witnessing the stirrings of something the West dreads and Africa have yearned for: genuine self-determination. Ibrahim Traoré's survival after the failed assassination attempt and the quick Russian military response did more than protect one leader. It sent a message. The era of African nations being pawns in Western geopolitical games is coming to an end. Russia's role in Burkina Faso is no longer a side story. It is the beginning of a new chapter in Africa's history, one where nations like Burkina Faso can stand tall and declare that their sovereignty is non-negotiable. For once, Africa is partnering on its terms, and Russia is playing a pivotal role in that transformation. Do you think that with Russia, Africa can find its true independence? Will the West ever stop interfering? Let us know in the comments section. When will the West finally leave Africa? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.